Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for your interest in today's webinar. This is the 7th webinar the TTI has put on since September. The aim of these bi-weekly webinars is to allow us to easily engage and share with presenters and with each other on a range of topics. We have 3 formats for these webinars. The first is practically driven, which is the format that we've had for the majority of our webinars. These included presentations on Google Analytics, search engine optimization, Google applications, and accessing data through the ThinkTake Initiative database. The second format is topic-driven, which provides a space for a more spontaneous discussion amongst many participants on a particular topic. This was the format for our webinar on November 22nd, where we had a discussion on what a post-MBB development agenda might look like. The final format for our webinar is author or guest speaker-driven. Today's webinar will be practically driven, as Caitlin Miles will lead us through the mysterious world of Twitter. So, Caitlin Miles is an independent consultant specializing in monitoring and evaluation, data modeling, and making technical and quantitative ideas accessible to a general audience. She also dabbles in data visualization and in writing and editing. Her background is in physics, international development, and economics. She has worked in Canada, Tanzania, and the Dominican Republic. She is currently an independent consultant for hire and is based in Montreal, Canada. She is fluent in English, French, and Spanish and is passionate about international development, technology, and travel. Without further ado, I will pass it over to Caitlin.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Okay, I'm just going to click on share my desktop. All right. So as Sarah said, today I'll be giving a presentation about Twitter, what it is, and how to use it effectively. So I'll be covering 4 major topics. First of all, what is Twitter? Second of all, who uses it? Third, some of the vocabulary around Twitter, which can be a little bit confusing. And fourth, what are some best practices when using Twitter? And the bulk of the presentation will be on points 3 and 4. So to begin with, what is Twitter? The best way Twitter can be described is as a microblogging site. So basically, Twitter allows you to put up extremely short blog posts. They're so short, in fact, that the maximum length of each of these posts is 140 characters, and that includes spaces and punctuation. And each of these posts is called a tweet. So here's an example of a single tweet. This is a tweet from The Economist magazine. It says, net migration to Britain is falling quite sharply according to the latest provisional data. Will the decline continue? And then there's a shortened link at the end of this tweet. So this tweet is actually exactly 140 characters long. So that's the longest that a tweet can possibly be on Twitter. So what can you do on Twitter? Well, without an account, you can see any public Twitter feed. So here is The Economist public Twitter feed. And you can go to this feed by just going to twitter.com/The Economist. So you see on this page, all of The Economist tweets are in the bottom right of the page, and anyone can go and look at that. The other thing you can do on Twitter, even without an account, is you can search Twitter. And you can do this by going to twitter.com/search. And you can search for any term. For example, here's a search I performed on the term MDGs, Millennium Development Goals. And what it does is it looks through all the tweets that everyone has put up on Twitter recently, and it will show you all the tweets that have that term in it. So again, that's something you can do even without an account. If you do create an account, the first thing that happens is that you will get a Twitter username. And the first thing to know about usernames is that whenever you refer to someone's username, you precede it with the @ symbol. So, for example, here are a few possible usernames. There's @The Economist, which we just saw. For an individual, you might have @John_Smith. And then the Think Tank Initiative Twitter account for the conference in South Africa is @TTIX2012. So those are just a few examples of usernames. Once you have an account and a username, then you can actually start composing your own tweets. And then, once you've done that, you can start searching for users that you're interested in. So other people on Twitter who have similar interests to you, similar research interests, for example. And then you can follow them. So when you follow someone, that means that you'll see all of their tweets in your feed in Twitter when you log in. So all of the tweets from all of the people that you follow will be lined up in one big Twitter feed. And of course, the reverse is also true. Other Twitter users can follow you. And if someone follows you, they're called your follower. And then if they're following you, they'll see all of your tweets appear in their Twitter feed. And the number of followers that an account or a person on Twitter has is sort of a proxy for how influential that person is in Twitter. Before I go any further, I just want to clarify the word feed, which I've been using a bit. So a feed basically is any dynamic list of tweets when I'm talking about Twitter. So by dynamic, I mean this list is updating itself. There are two main types of feeds that I'll be referring to in this presentation, and I've already mentioned them both. The first is an individual account feed. So that's all of the tweets that that person or that account has written. So your Twitter feed is all of your tweets lined up, and it's dynamic because as soon as you write a new tweet, it will automatically be added to this feed. The other type of Twitter feed that I've already referred to is the feed of tweets from all of the accounts that you follow. So these are not tweets that you have composed, rather they're tweets that have been composed by the people that you follow. And it's important to note that you only ever see tweets by people that you follow in this type of feed. So this type of feed is dynamic because as soon as someone writes a new tweet, it will appear in this feed. So the next topic I want to touch on is who uses Twitter. So I think it's a general misconception that Twitter is all about celebrities and people talking about completely basic things like what they had for breakfast that morning. And it is true that the two top Twitter users are Lady Gaga and Justin Bieber, who are pop stars. So Lady Gaga has over 31 million followers, and Justin Bieber has over 30 million followers. Nonetheless, Twitter is now far more than just a platform for celebrities. And there are many interesting people and influential organizations that have Twitter accounts. So there are many individuals, for example, politicians like Barack Obama, who has, you'll see, nearly as many followers as Justin Bieber. And then there are researchers and academics like William Easterly and Nancy Birdsall. And there are other influential people such as Bill Gates. So these people all have Twitter accounts and they have many followers. Next, there are news outlets and publications that have Twitter feeds. So here are a few examples. We've already seen The Economist, there's Jeune Afrique, The Times of India, Al Jazeera English. So all of these, there are news outlets from around the world that have Twitter feeds and have many followers. And then there are institutions and NGOs. So for example, the United Nations, the World Bank, IDRC, and Oxfam also have Twitter accounts. So why do all of these individuals and institutions use Twitter? What's the advantage of Twitter? Well, the first big advantage of Twitter is that it's real time, it's instant. So everything on Twitter is completely fresh news. And it now often happens that big world events are tweeted about before they appear on any news site. Twitter is also great in that it's real time because you can follow comments and tweets about events that are actually happening right now. So for example, for the United States election, Twitter set up a page that collected tweets from all sorts of influential people and also just regular Twitter users that were all related to the United States election. Twitter is also very popular because it's quick and it's easy. By nature, you can only write 140 characters, so the posts are very short. It doesn't take much time to compose. So you can easily link to some content, to an article you've written, or just make a comment without very much effort. Twitter is also great because it's informal and it's interactive. It really encourages direct interaction. And in fact, communities get built on Twitter, communities of people who share interests, for example. And they end up discussing things together, sharing papers and articles. So there's a lot of back and forth. So it's really a great platform for sharing knowledge, for disseminating your work, and creating linkages with other people and other institutions that share your interests. So I just want to emphasize that Twitter really is whatever you make of it. You only see tweets from accounts that you follow in your feed. So that means that if you follow interesting people and organizations, then your Twitter feed will always be full of interesting tweets. The next topic I'm going to talk about is the vocabulary, which can be a little bit confusing, especially at first. So I've already discussed the words tweets and followers. So tweets, again, are just any message that you publish on Twitter. And a follower is someone on Twitter that follows your Twitter account and sees all of your account's tweets in their Twitter feed. So the next term I want to talk about is mentions. So if you want to mention another Twitter account in your tweet, you use their Twitter username preceded by the @ symbol without a space in between the @ and the username. So for example, here's a tweet by Bill Gates where he is mentioning the CEO of his foundation. And he also mentioned at the bottom of the tweet, Forbes magazine. So these are two Twitter users. His CEO has a Twitter account and Forbes magazine has a Twitter account. And you'll see that both of the mentions are in a different color. And if you were in Twitter, you could click on either of those and you would be brought to their Twitter feed. The next term is retweet. So if you see a tweet that's interesting, you can repeat that tweet and send it out to all of your followers. And if you do that, that's called retweeting. So there are two ways that you can do this. The first and most simple way is when you hover over a tweet, a little retweet button will appear below it. And if you just click on that, it will copy the tweet exactly and send it out to all of your followers into their feed. And it will look like that tweet originates from the original writer of the tweet. So to use Bill Gates again as an example, this is his Twitter feed. So these are the tweets that he has composed. And you'll see that the third tweet from the top is actually by Melinda Gates, his wife. And I've put a red box around the little note that says that this was retweeted by Bill Gates. So he has retweeted her tweet, and that showed up in his feed with her photo and her username. Another way you can retweet is you can actually just highlight the text in a tweet and copy it, and then paste it into the compose box in Twitter. And this is good to do if you want to add your own comment, for example. So in the example here, I've put before the retweet, I put great question. So that's my own editorializing. And then I put RT. And RT, it stands for retweet. And that signals to the people following your tweet that what follows is not your own content. So the downside of doing it this way is that often you'll go over your 140 characters. And you see that this is signaled to you by the number in the lower right-hand corner of this little window. It says -29. So that means I'm 29 characters over the 140 character count. So I would have to abridge this somehow. So that's the downside of retweeting using this method. The next term that's really important to know is hashtag. So in Twitter, a hashtag is any word that's preceded by this hashtag symbol. And the word can't have any spaces or punctuation. So in any tweet, you can click on a hashtag term, and that will take you to another page where you'll see all of the tweets in Twitter with that same hashtag. So basically, a hashtag is like metadata. It identifies your tweet with a specific topic, and it makes it more likely to be found by people who share that interest. Hashtags are generally used in three ways. First of all, people use hashtags to highlight keywords within a sentence. So for example, here's a tweet by Stephanie Nolan, who's a Canadian journalist. Her tweet says, "Canada radically shifting its foreign aid priorities, here to promoting Canadian interests abroad." And she has put a hashtag symbol before the words Canada and foreign aid. And foreign aid she's written in one word because if you put a space there, it would only make foreign the hashtag term itself. So you see that Canada and foreign aid are in different colors. And if you were in Twitter, you could click on either of these words and it would bring you to the list of all tweets with those terms in it. The other way hashtags are often used is at the end of a tweet to indicate what the tweet relates to a certain topic. So here's a tweet by Global News, which is a Canadian news outlet. And at the end of the tweet, they put the hashtag CDN Polgate. and that is an abbreviation for Canadian politics. So they haven't actually used the hashtag as a word in their sentence, but they're sort of tagging their tweet as being related in some way to Canadian politics. So anyone who's following that specific hashtag would then see this tweet. And the third way that hashtags are very commonly used on Twitter is to add humor or sarcasm to a tweet. So for example, this person has tweeted, "Lock my keys in my car, hashtag lucky me." So that's just the third way that hashtags are often used for humor and sarcasm. Now, something you'll probably have heard in the media, for example, is that something is trending on Twitter. So whenever you go onto Twitter, on the bottom left-hand side of the page, there's a box that contains trends. And you should note, first of all, these trends are for a specific location. So what I've shown here is Canada trends. So these are the terms that are trending in Canada. You can change this location. You can change it to worldwide or to a specific country or even a specific city. And what's trending are hashtags or words, and it's generated by an algorithm, so it's completely automatic. And what it means is that these words or hashtags have seen a sudden increase in popularity. It's not just that they're being used a lot, it's that there's a sudden increase. So it's really meant to show what's happening right now on Twitter. So putting all of this together, I'm going to dissect the anatomy of a specific tweet. So this is a tweet by UNAIDS. It says, "Ambassador Eric Goosby of PEPFAR on the new U.S. blueprint to create an AIDS-free generation." So the first thing to note is the username, @UNAIDS. And then right above it is the real name. So the real name doesn't have to be exactly the same as the username. In this case it is, but it can be longer and more descriptive. So for example, the New York Times username is @NYTimes, all in one word, whereas the real name is the New York Times, properly with spaces and capitalization. The next thing to notice is this little blue check mark. So the blue check mark indicates that this is a verified profile. So Twitter verifies the profiles of very popular accounts or very popular individuals. And they do this because fake accounts will pop up with similar names that people have created just to try to gain followers or to sort of self-promote. So for example, here are 4 accounts that are kind of perversions on the Lady Gaga name. And only the first one is the real singer, and that's been verified by Twitter. The other 3 are imposter accounts of some kind. So next up in this tweet is a mention. So they've mentioned PEPFAR. And again, if we were in Twitter right now, you could click on that and you would be brought to PEPFAR's Twitter feed. And next there's a link. And you'll notice that in Twitter, links are often abbreviated, and that's just because people don't want the link to count towards 140 characters. So you can use a link abbreviator such as bit.ly or owly, or Twitter will also abbreviate links for you automatically. And again, you can click on this link and go to the website. And then finally, there's a hashtag. This is WAD 2012, and that stands for World AIDS Day 2012. So once again, you could click on this, and you will be brought to a feed with all of the tweets that are tagged with this hashtag. So next, I'd like to go over a few best practices on Twitter. First of all, how can a research institution use Twitter to their advantage? So the first way that it should be clear is that it's a great medium for disseminating your work. It's just another way to get your work out there. You can tweet links to your website, to new publications, to videos, to articles, etc. It's also really a great tool for networking, for building connections and communities with other researchers and with policy actors. And you can build communities around certain areas of research, for example. It's also a great way to connect with individual researchers and other institutions that work on the same kinds of things that you work on. And another great use of Twitter is to create interactions at conferences and events, which is what TTI did in South Africa, for example. So one website I found describes hashtags as the new conference water cooler. So if your conference has a specific hashtag, all of the attendees can follow that hashtag and they'll see everyone's tweets related to that hashtag, even if they don't know each other and don't follow each other on Twitter. So, and a lot of people at conferences will project a live feed of the tweet or put this on their website. So it just provides some real-time feedback and discussion, and people can even ask questions and give comments via Twitter. So now I want to talk about a few do's and don'ts with regards to Twitter. So the first thing that's really important is that you should definitely link your website and your social media. Your website is still the main presence of your institution on the internet. So that's the first place people will go. So it's very important to advertise the fact that you use Twitter directly on your website, preferably right on the front page and using the very recognizable Twitter logo. It's also possible, if you want, to put a feed of all of your tweets on your website. So you'll see a little box with the 3 or 5 most recent tweets from your Twitter account directly on the website. If you use other social media, of course, it's also important to link from your website to those social media. And for some of these, it's also possible to create a feed back to your website. For example, you can put YouTube videos on your website. You can put the headlines of your latest blog posts, etc. But it's also great that you can link from Twitter to your social media. So, for example, if you put up a new blog post, you should tweet that. And some blog sites like WordPress actually let you do this automatically. If you upload a new YouTube video, you should tweet that as well. And then finally, some of these social media allow you to link back to Twitter. For example, you can link your Facebook and Twitter accounts such that every time you tweet something new, it is automatically posted to Facebook as well. And on WordPress, and I'm sure on Blogger as well, you can also embed your Twitter feed directly on there. So these are just ways of sort of unifying your online presence and linking them to one another. The second tip I have is definitely follow to be followed. So when you're trying to gain followers, the best thing to do is to find accounts that are interesting. So by researchers or institutions that are working on the same kinds of things as you, and follow them. Because when you do, they receive an email alert. And more likely than not, they're going to check out your account, and they might actually start following you as well. And of course, the reverse is also true. If someone starts following you, you should see if they are someone who works on something that's interesting to you, and then you can follow them back. Another thing that's very good to do on Twitter is to interact. So the way this can be done, for example, if you put up a tweet about a new paper you've written, what impact is mining having in northern Tanzania, find out here. And then some researcher who follows you retweets that and says, very interesting paper. It's great to then reply to that researcher again and say something like, thank you. And you might want to point them towards something else that's related to the same topic. So it's good to do this because it really plays into the nature of Twitter, which is that it's casual and conversational. It's meant to be interactive. And it also engages with people very directly, and it can help you attract more followers because that researcher's followers is also seeing this conversation. And the next thing to do is to be smart about hashtags. So you can use, as I said, hashtags to highlight key themes like environment, poverty, nutrition, etc. It's also good, though, to use popular and relevant hashtags that are used by other people in the community that are interested in the same things as you, because they're going to be following these hashtags as well, even if they don't necessarily follow your account. So, as an example, CDN Poly is the Canadian politics hashtag. And then also there are often hashtags associated with big events. So World AIDS Day 2012 had a hashtag, as we saw. IWD is International Women's Day, and there's currently something, hashtag 16 days that's ongoing, which is 16 days of activism against violence against women. So there are a number of institutions that are currently tweeting something every day for 16 days related to violence against women. So using these, especially these last two types, is very good for generating new conversations with people who aren't necessarily following you yet. The hard part is actually figuring out what these tags are and which ones are appropriate for you. And I would say that the best way of discovering hashtags is actually to follow other people, because they'll probably be using these hashtags as well. So to follow big institutions and researchers who will be using the right hashtags. And now a few don'ts. So speaking about hashtags, it's really important not to overuse hashtags. As you can see in this tweet, Twitter tip, too many hashtags makes it difficult to read a tweet. So it can actually make your tweets illegible if you use too many hashtags. So for example, this is a really bad way of using hashtags. New policy paper on environmental impacts of mining in Tanzania. So I put hashtags before policy, environmental impacts, mining Tanzania, and then I've also tagged it with 4 extra hashtags. It's hard to read. It also sort of loses the meaning, and if there are so many hashtags, none of them actually really jump out at you. It also kind of looks spammy. It looks like you're just trying to attract followers who might be looking for certain keywords. So the right way to go about this is to pick 1 or 2 relevant hashtags that will jump out. So new policy paper on environmental impacts of hashtag mining in Tanzania, hashtag environment. This is the right way to go about it. And it's important to remember that people can actually search for keywords that aren't hashtagged. So if someone searched for the word Tanzania, both of these tweets would show up. So you don't have to hashtag every keyword in your tweet just to make it be able to be found on Twitter. The next thing not to do is not to be quote-unquote spammy. So don't over-tweet. Don't send out all of your day's tweets in the space of half an hour. You should space them out. There are 2 reasons why you shouldn't do this. First of all, you won't reach as many people if you put out all of your tweets at once, because Twitter is live, so people only see tweets when you've actually tweeted them. So you'll basically only reach the people who happen to be looking at Twitter at that very moment. The second reason it's bad is that the people who are looking at Twitter at that very moment will be overwhelmed by all of your tweets, and that can be really annoying. It's also important in terms of over-tweeting that you not set up some kind of automatic feed that will push a lot of content to Twitter throughout the day. Because again, the people who follow you will not appreciate seeing their entire Twitter feed flooded by endless tweets by you. Another thing to avoid is overusing mentions. So people often use mentions to try to get the attention of specific accounts on Twitter, individuals or institutions, because they want them to follow them or to read their articles, etc. So first of all, it's not good to do this because it's very transparent that what you're doing is trying to fish for new followers. And second of all of these tweets are going to appear in the feeds of your followers. So if you do this, it's again going to be irritating for them. And the last thing you want to do is make your followers irritated by your your tweets, because they will stop following you. And the last piece of advice on Twitter is don't be boring with your tweets. Remember that your tweet is going to show up in a long stream of other tweets. So you really have to entice people to click on your links. So here's an example of what not to do. Don't put up a tweet that says new policy paper and then a link. This is bad mostly because it's completely non-descriptive. People have no idea what this paper is about, so they're very unlikely to click on it. A slightly better way to do this is to put in, for example, the title of the paper, the environmental impact of mining in northern Tanzania, and then links to the paper. So this is good because the title offers context about what the paper is about. But the tone is still very academic, and there are also no verbs in the tweet, so it makes it completely non-conversational. So the best way of using Twitter would be to write this third kind of tweet. Is mining degrading the environment in northern Tanzania? Our latest policy paper studies this question. This is the best option because it has a conversational tone, and it also offers context. You're talking about mining, the environment in northern Tanzania. And it uses non-academic language and uses verbs, so it's very casual and non-academic. So this is the tweet that's most likely to get people to click on your link. So that's all I have, and I guess I can open up to questions and pass the ball back to you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Caitlin, for demystifying the world of Twitter. So I will now open the floor to questions. If anyone has any, please feel free to pose.
Yes, This is Ahmed.
Oh, please go ahead, Ahmed.
Yeah, Caitlin, thanks for this presentation. It was very clear. I have one specific question with regard to your, comments about how it is relevant for think tanks.
Yeah.
So you said that think tanks can possibly use it to, publicize or make note to people who are following their sites on what new research they're doing, sharing policy briefs, etc. But presumably these content, like policy papers, are already, presumably on their website. So what is the added benefit of putting it, flagging it in the Twitter?
Well, that's a great question. I would say that there are a few benefits of flagging it in Twitter. First of all, when you put something up on your website, it's relatively static. It's just sort of sitting there waiting for someone to click onto your website and come across it. Whereas on Twitter, you're actually sending out a message to many followers. So people are more likely to just happen to come across it on Twitter. It's also, Twitter's also good because as I said, it's much more informal and conversational. So you're more likely to sort of reach out to people and engage them on Twitter and even start perhaps a discussion than you are if you just sort of put it on your website. And third, if people find your paper interesting, they may start retweeting it to their followers. So that sort of creates a network effect, and you might get exponentially more people visiting your website and looking at that output than you would if you had just put it on the website alone.
Mm-hmm. All right, thanks. If I may, another question?
Please, go ahead.
Just practical question about who in a think tank, specifically I'm thinking of think tanks, would be responsible for managing certain accounts. You said that, it creates opportunities for networking from researchers, but is it the communication officers who are people responsible for communication in a think tank who will be dealing with this, or managing the Twitter feeds, or it's more at higher level of management who, normally?
Yeah, well, I would say that it's best to have someone or one or two people who are dedicated to watching Twitter and posting tweets on behalf of the institution. However, I think it's also good for a think tank if they have some, star researchers or researchers who are very into social media to encourage them to actually create their own Twitter accounts and create linkages between the accounts. So, you can create sort of a brand identity where you've got your institution and then you have a couple of researchers associated clearly with your institution, and you can retweet each other's tweets. So you can create sort of a personality on Twitter for your institution, but also allow researchers to tweet on their own. So both of those strategies, I think, are good.
Mm-hmm. One final question, if I may. You said that each tweet cannot exceed 140 characters, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of exchange of ideas and sharing of knowledge or whatever, doesn't it constrain it to certain boards only? And how does that facilitate this exchange? Do you see that it's more linking to other pages or content that is more useful in that sense?
Yeah, I think so. Twitter, if you're using Twitter to converse with other people, you are constrained by the nature of the system. But it does sort of, what it encourages is conversation and a sort of casual tone. But it is good for linking to other things as well. So that's true. But it's not the place to put up a long discussion about a certain topic. You would link to more information about a certain topic.
All right. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Caitlin, I also have a question if you don't mind.
Sure.
So you mentioned followers. So if I understand correctly, if you establish a Twitter account, so let's say for this example, I have a Twitter account, and I'm following a number of people, and in return they're also following me. What if, for example, I end up being followed by someone who may be quote-unquote undesirable in that they're not following the best practices that you mentioned? So, they're hyper-tweeting, they're sending boring tweets. Is it possible to block a follower or to somehow manage the privacy in terms of, I suppose, not the privacy so much as just manage your account and who follows you ultimately?
Yes. So the first thing I'd say is that I mentioned that anyone can see public Twitter accounts. It is possible to create a private Twitter account if you really just want to be, completely shut off, and then people have to ask your permission to follow you. That's obviously not the route you would take if you're an institution or trying to disseminate information. But for an individual, if you want to do that, you can. The second thing I want to point out is that you don't have to follow everyone who is following you. So someone might follow you and you're not interested in what they're doing at all. You don't have to follow them back. And if you do follow someone and they're being spammy or they're putting up lots of tweets that you're not interested in, you can just unfollow them. And that won't affect, if they're following you, they'll continue to follow you, but you just won't see their tweets in your feed anymore. And then finally, I'm fairly certain that you can actually block individuals from following you. So if there's a specific person that you don't want to follow your tweets anymore, you can block them. So
okay, that's great. That's very helpful. So building on what Ahmed was saying then, for example, if you were to set up a Twitter account on behalf of your organization and have that ultimately be the public face, of course you would keep that public. Then what you might also do is the individual is set up a private account and you could manage it a little more, right?
Yeah, well, they would have two separate accounts though.
Yes, two separate accounts.
Yeah, well, I mean, the private accounts are really for individuals who are putting up more sort of personal.
Oh, okay.
If I were a researcher or someone who's putting up, retweeting news items or something about research, then I would keep it public. I would say the vast majority of accounts on Twitter are public accounts.
I have dozens of very messy accounts with all these tweets and retweets and hypertweets, but I guess that comes back to your point of, being able to block people who are not necessarily following everyone who's following you, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why you should use best practices, because if you start doing things like irritatingly retweeting everything that you see, then people will stop following you.
Right.
So, I mean, there is an incentive for people to use Twitter properly, because if you don't, you lose followers.
Right, okay. Okay, does anyone else have any further questions?
I have one specific question. Caitlin, do you have an idea of how many people use Twitter globally? Yeah, I'm thinking that are there figures of I'm thinking of TTI, the countries that TTI branches are located. So is it possible to find out how many people use Twitter in those countries, for example?
I'm sure it is. I've just Googled it here, and it looks like in all there are certainly at least 30 million, because that's the number of people who follow Lady Gaga. So, it says, Wikipedia says there are over 500 million active Twitter users. And I'm sure that it is possible to find statistics on the number of Twitter accounts per country as well.
Okay, I'll look that up.
Okay, well, if there are no further questions, I think that concludes our webinar for today. So, again, thanks so much to Caitlin for educating us on the world of Twitter. Greatly appreciated. Thanks, everyone.